Hey there, and welcome to the third episode of our 2022 Mercedes-Benz Sprinter van conversion. In last week's episode, we started our very first project in the van by laying down our subfloor. If you didn't watch that video yet and you're curious on how we built our subfloor, then go ahead and click this link right here and it'll take you right to it. In this week's episode, we're going to be tackling our electrical system. Now, I am not an electrician, so I will probably keep my explanations more in a surface level tone, just so that you get an idea on what we are doing and maybe see some things you would like to do in your own build. Now, what I will do is I will link resources down below that I personally used so that you can find answers to everything that I did in this build for yourself. I do need to give a shout out to the Explorers.life channel for their detailed wiring guides, templates, and customer service during this process. Being that this was my first electrical install in a van, I thought it would be wise to shell out a few extra dollars to purchase somebody else's experience and research to help with my own build. So if you're interested in what they have to offer, I'll go ahead and link their channel down below. So the first stage of this build was to highlight all of the products that we needed to send electricity to. Since this system is based off of a 12 volt 600 amp hour battery bank, I wanted to go ahead and run everything that I possibly could on a 12 volt circuit to maximize my electrical efficiency. So the 12 volt side of my system will be this: 12 volt puck lights, a few 12 volt LED strip lights, two 12 volt max air fans, a 12 volt water pump, a water gauge and a water sensor, a 12 volt water heater, USB outlets, reading lights, a 12 volt isotherm refrigerator, and 6 12 volt LED exterior lights. Now, if you watched the first episode in this series, you'll remember that we didn't plan to put external lights on this van at all. Well, plans are living and they tend to be changed. Once I had all the 12 volt products listed out, I went ahead and sized the proper wire as well as the fuses needed for those circuits. After that, I started running my wire. Now, the wire I used in this build is a marine grade stranded wire that meets the ABYC standards. Now, there is this really cool duplex marine wire that comes with an extra sheathing that I'll probably use in future builds, but for this build, I use an expandable sheathing to cover all my wires to ensure they are protected. This wire comes with a 105 degrees Celsius insulation, which comes highly recommended for these builds. Now, I'll go ahead and link the different types of wire down below so that you can purchase them in the future if you like. Please note, these are affiliate links, which means purchasing through them will provide me a small commission. There's no extra cost to you, it's just a nice way to support what I'm doing. Now, the main wire sizes I used was 12 and 16 gauge wire with a small amount of 10 gauge and 14 gauge for some of the larger draws and runs. The first system I went ahead and wired up was the 12 volt puck light system. This circuit will be on a single on-off switch that will be located in the main living area, and I wired the circuits in parallel, creating different branches that spanned out in packs of 4 lights. I designed it this way to help keep my wire runs neat and out of the way when I go to put the ceilings and the walls up. Now, the only system I put on a two-way switch was the water pump, and the reason I did this is because I wanted to be able to turn the water pump on from the living area as well as the back of the van where the outdoor shower was going to be. I also put the hot water on a single on-off switch that will be located in the main switch panel in the kitchen area to ensure that the hot water heater is only running when we want it to run. The last and most tricky step was wiring a relay for my exterior lights. Since I knew that this wire run was going to be pretty long, adding a relay allowed for me to use a smaller wire size while maintaining the proper voltage drop requirements. The exterior lights will be all on the same switch, which uses the negative side of the circuit to toggle from on to off. This switch was different from the other switches in the van, so it took me a minute to wrap my head around it honestly, but there is some pretty detailed explanations out there as well as the instructions from the relay manufacturer itself. Once I ran my relay to the back part of the van, I went ahead and pulled the wire from the roof through a small access hole I drilled earlier. Now, right now, I went ahead and used lever nuts just because they were easy and efficient for me to work with, but in the future, I'm going to go ahead and properly splice all these together and use heat shrink to ensure that everything is weatherproof and as secure as possible. Lastly, the little access hole that I pulled my wire through is going to be getting a rubber grommet. I just didn't have it for this video, but that's just going to ensure that the wire is not rubbing up against the metal itself and will keep it a little bit more protected in the future. After I ran all of my 12 volt circuits, it was time to install our shore power inlet. Now, this process was pretty simple. It just involved cutting a hole in a very expensive van using a hole saw, and then making sure to paint all of the cut edges to avoid rusting, and then to wire the shore power inlet, and finally bolting the entire unit to the van. The shore power inlet we used here has a sealant already on the backside that prevents leaks and water from entering the system. It was then time for me to finish cutting, crimping, and heat shrinking the various lugs onto the wires for the brains of the system. And then I started connecting all of the wires to their various locations and homes they were supposed to go to. Now, once everything was set up, I wired my lights, my exterior lights, and my water pump circuits to my 12-volt fuse block. Then I turned the power on, and then I flicked my switches, and voila, I had working power. For the water pump, I just wired in one of my 12-volt puck lights to test the continuity of the circuit, since I didn't have any of my plumbing installed yet and didn't want to turn the pump on. Now that all my 12-volt circuits were working, it was time to wire my 120-volt outlets to give them a test run. My 120-volt system is pretty straightforward. I'm going to have a run of outlets on the driver's side, a run of outlets on the passenger side, and then I'm going to have a dedicated outlet for my 1500 watt induction cooktop and a dedicated outlet for various appliances such as blenders and coffee makers on the other side. Now, I don't know where the final home for all these outlets really is going to be, since some of them will be mounted inside of cabinets and the final walls. So that's really all we're going to talk about today with the 120 volt outlet system. With that wraps up this week's episode. So if you enjoyed the content, then please consider giving it a thumbs up down below, and also maybe consider hitting that subscribe button as well as the bell icon to be notified when I post the next video, where we're going to be laying down our laminate flooring inside of the van. But that's all for today, so I'll see you guys in the next one.